to Prairie Fire Lines, the show where we spark conversations about prescribed fire and its role in conserving Canada's prairie grasslands. I'm Kat Zenz, your host and Communications and Outreach Officer for the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange. We work with partners across Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba to bring fire back to the land safely, effectively, and with respect for the Indigenous traditions that have guided grassland stewardship for generations. We acknowledge that the prairie provinces that we work on are situated on Treaties 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and the homeland of the Métis. Each episode, you'll hear from people in the fire world about how prescribed fire works, why it matters, and the many ways it helps our prairie ecosystems thrive. So cozy up by the fireplace. This is Prairie Fire Lines, where we keep the conversation burning. Welcome back to another episode of Prairie Fire Lines. So here at the CPPFE, we help organize prescribed fire training exchanges, better known as TREX, every year. One of these is the Canadian Prairies TREX, which is a week-long training event that the Meewasin Valley Authority has hosted in the Saskatoon region every October since 2022. This year, from October 20th to 24th, 57 participants from 28 agencies from across the country joined us to build up their prescribed fire and leadership skills, form meaningful connections, and bring new knowledge back to their home organizations, all while gaining experience within an incident command system structure. Indeed, 16 participants completed their first ever prescribed fire during the week, alongside the introduction of 2 new burn bosses, 3 new division leads, and 8 new line leads. And by getting fire on the landscape, this TREX also advanced ecological and land management objectives at multiple sites around Saskatoon. Over the 5-day event, crews burned 187.73 acres across 13 units. To dig into how the week unfolded, I set up a Zoom call with some of the individuals who made it all possible. Joining me are Incident Commander Renny Grilz, Planning Chief Roy Vera-Velez, Operations Chief Kerry Hecker, and our 3 incredible trainers, Brad Elder, Melanie Schmidt, and Ryan Schmidt, who traveled all the way from the United States to share their expertise. They'll walk us through how this TREX came together, from planning procedures to a day-to-day look at operations. If you're listening from home, this conversation offers a great overview of the experience and may help you decide if this training is the right fit for you. Before we begin, I want to thank Meewasin for hosting, and to the Weston Family Prairie Grasslands Initiative for fully funding this year's TREX. Your support allows us to keep these training opportunities affordable and accessible, and we're excited to continue growing TREX in the years ahead. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this very special episode of Prairie Fire Lines. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prairie Fire Lines. So in this podcast, we are going to be talking about the 2025 Canadian Prairies TREX that happened in Saskatoon from October 20th to 24th. And I'm here with all the trainers who came up from the United States, as well as Renny Grilz, who is our incident commander, Kerry Hecker, who is our operations chief, and Roy Vera-Velez, who is our planning chief, and myself, who was the public information officer. So, does everybody want to go around and introduce ourselves and what we do? So, for starters, I'm Kat. I'm the communications officer for the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange. I was the public information officer, so I worked on getting press releases out, informing the public of the burns we were doing, and doing social media and photography. So let's go around, and Kerry, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Kerry Hecker. I was the operations chief for the 2025 TREX out of Saskatoon. In my day job, I work for the Canadian Wildlife Service, and I'm the manager of the Last Mountain Lake National Wildlife Area and Migratory Bird Sanctuary, which has the distinction of being one of the first protected areas in North America. It was originally, the lands were set aside in 1887. So as part of that land management, we do fire.
And Roy, you are next.
Course. Hello, my name is Roy Vera-Velez, and on my regular job day, I'm the science coordinator for the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange. Essentially, I connect with people, research institutes, academics, and people who use prescribed fire on a regular basis in order to understand how that effective is an effective tool as a management tool in the ecosystem, in grassland ecosystems. So that's kind of my role at the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange. And during the last treks this year in 2025, I assumed the role as the planning chief. So I was really excited to hold that position, and it was really exciting for me, a new challenge and a great learning experience. Thank you, Kat.
All right, I'm going to move on to Renny.
Hi everyone, I'm Renny Grilz. During the TREX event, I was the incident commander for the event. So I was the person behind the scenes helping everyone with the flow to make sure the event went off without any hitches. And my day job, I am the manager of conservation with Meewasin Valley Authority in Saskatoon, where we're responsible for looking after the South Saskatchewan River Valley in and around the city of Saskatoon and working with numerous partners in managing these conservation spaces within the region.
All right, Renny, and we're moving on to the trainers. So let's start with Brad.
My name is Brad. I teach at a university in the United States, Stone University. My background has been fire ecology, is what my PhD is in. I've spent the last 30 plus years doing prescribed fire and helping land managers develop prescribed fire programs and developing that knowledge background. I do some work with wildland firefighters, but mostly it's that. And I'm also a structural firefighter or volunteer in my community. And I've been up at TREX for 3 years now.
And Ryan.
Yes, I'm Ryan Schmidt. I served as a trainer as at this year's event for the first time. I work down in Iowa for Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation, and I work as the Central Iowa Land Stewardship Director.
Let's move on to Melanie.
Yeah, hello. I'm Melanie Schmidt here. I work for the Nature Conservancy on the North America Fire Program as a module leader. And my job entails conducting prescribed fire across the US with various partners and organizations. And at this year's Canadian Prairies TREX, I served as the lead trainer, collaborating with the other US instructors and organizing training opportunities for participants. And this was my second time attending the TREX as a co-instructor last year.
So the first thing I want to ask you guys about, in case there are people who don't know, what exactly is TREX? What is the purpose of it, and why do we do it?
Yeah, this is Brad. I can address that. The idea behind the TREX is really an exchange of knowledge. That's really at its core, and every TREX is a little different. It depends on who's showing up. Sometimes we just have land managers, ranchers, individuals like that. Other times it's wildland crews who are not only looking for that knowledge, but also looking for certifications. But at its core, it really is an exchange of knowledge and building that knowledge base. And at the Canadian TREX, it's true for the first time individuals who are just getting on their first experience with fire, all the way up to the IC staff and including the trainers. For me, one of the struggles being a trainer, I'm a professor, and so I tell my students to go do something, and they will often come up and ask a question. And if I really want them to learn, if I really want them to be independent, then I shouldn't tell them how to do that or tell them the answer. I should ask another question back and send them back to doing it. And I can do that in the classroom really easy, but doing it on a fire ground is a little harder. So it was a real struggle for me to not take the reins, not take the tool, not take the hose, not run the show, but to step back and say, listen, I need you to go out and struggle, and I need you to fail, and I need you to learn from that and to keep going. So it's really an exchange of knowledge from the first person on the fire to some of the people who've been doing it for a long time.
I'll add on to that too, Brad. I think, TREXs are a great opportunity for participants to just fully immerse themselves in learning and growing their knowledge of fire. And it's also a great opportunity to build partnerships in a community of fire practitioners, which I think the Canadian Prairies TREX has proven over the last 4 years, is building those partnerships that go beyond the week of TREX.
I'm going to add on to you there as well, Melanie. One of the best things about this training exchange is the experiential learning. I did lots of intellectual learning and academic learning through university, but the experiential learning where you can act in a certain way with fire and see how it behaves in return and apply perhaps a different tool or a different action to the fire and see how it behaves. You get instant feedback, and with somebody perhaps guiding you at first, you can really see the cause and effect and the effectiveness of what you're doing and get that instant feedback. So you can learn very, very quickly if you're ready to go.
I'm curious more about like what the importance of TREX is from a prairie perspective and why it's so important to do it in our grassland ecosystems that we have up here.
Yeah, so our first Canadian Prairies TREX was held back in 2022, and the reason we hosted it here in the Saskatoon region for the first event was to help build the fire capacity within the Western Canadian Prairie provinces on how to expand our fire capacity. Quite often, a lot of us agencies or individuals were burning together. We're doing burning to our skill set and our knowledge base. And the TREX event really helped us to expand that knowledge and experience, and then also build that partnership and network of people across the prairies burning together. It's really been interesting watching over the last 4 years and watching individuals on their growth and that leadership development in the use of fire and how they've applied fire to that landscape. Taking that knowledge from our trainers coming up from the States, sharing their wisdom and experience, and then watching people here taking that knowledge and experience and applying it back at their home agencies and watching them grow their fire programs as well. This spring, I had the opportunity of joining Dale Gross with Saskatchewan Provincial Parks. So that this would have been his fourth TREX this year. This spring would have been his third year post TREX. And just watching his skill set as a burn boss and as a leader of his fire program, building upon the experience of burning over the 3 years and taking that and expanding it, applying it to his land base and delivering a larger fire program. His agency had lost their fire leader. The gentleman had retired, and then Dale assumed the role, but he didn't have that experience. And so using these TREX models is a great way to build that experience and knowledge and capacity. And we've also used it for new agencies to take that knowledge and experience as well. So for example, Wascana, which is the Provincial Capital Commission in Regina, looks after land in and around the provincial legislature. And they participated in several TREXs. And then 2 weeks after the TREX event here in Saskatoon, they went and conducted their first prescribed fire in the city of Regina. And so seeing that success and that use and knowledge and partnership development has been really helpful in building that fire program here in Western Canada.
Looking back historically, before the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange existed, there were about 4 or 5 agencies in Saskatchewan who would use prescribed fire. And we all struggled with staff turnover and finding training for new people to be able to bring them in on our prescribed fire crew with some due diligence in the training. And so we struggled with training for a very long time. Now we have Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange, and this TREX is wonderful. It has both the Introduction to Prescribed Fire course that's available online through the CPPFE. And then building on that, we actually give experiential learning with fire. And that is improving people's skills and ability with prescribed fire much more rapidly. And I feel like I'm getting some depth in my prescribed fire crew at my home agency because they have layered experience and with different people and in different landscapes rather than just starting from square one with me all the time.
I'm just going to add what Renny and Kerry mentioned about how TREX benefits the Canadian prairies. And I think besides the point that those are that Renny and Kerry mentioned is that looking at the big picture here is that we're trying to put fire back into the landscape and from the ecological perspective, fire is really important as a natural disturbance that is belongs to the north area of North America prairies. So we're trying to put fire back into this landscape with a safety perspective. So TREX, in my opinion, is a unique tool that helps us into that purpose. So to improve the capability, the capacity, individual capacity of personnel, and also each agency to improve the capacity to conduct fire operations in a safety way.
I think beyond, building individual skill sets and skills among our programs, I think building uh, a bigger fire culture and acceptance of fire with community members outside of our agencies and people who aren't directly tied to fire, I think is a big part of it too. So we're trying to educate the general public and people who may interact with um, us or fire on the landscape and help them understand why it's a positive tool, what it's all about, and the purpose behind what we're doing.
And another question I do have for you and the rest of the trainers is, can we talk more about bringing you up to Canada for treks and like the differences between burning in the US and in Canada? Because I imagine it might look different from a training perspective.
Yeah, it's for us, it's valuable to burn with new people and different landscapes. It's we interact with different. We're also in the prairie region, but we're in the tallgrass prairie region in Iowa, and so interacting with different fuels, um, uh, just provides that different experience. So there's always something to learn when we go to events like this, and we love to share our knowledge and experiences as well. So it's kind of a two-way street. We come up to share knowledge and learn, and that's what makes these treks events so valuable.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I think, it's one thing to understand fire behavior, but it's another to be able to teach and help instruct and guide others through that. And so it's in a way a challenge and an opportunity for Ryan, myself, and Brad to learn how to teach and instruct in a variety of different ways that will resonate with participants. And like Ryan said, just even the opportunity to see a different landscape and see the stewardship that goes behind the scenes on the land. For us, it's an opportunity to see how things can be done differently. So it's a two-way street. We're learning, but we're also providing, guidance and opportunities for participants.
To add on to that, just when you think about what are the differences between the U.S. and Canada, in terms of most of my burning is with land managers and landowners, and I work a lot with ranchers and small little nature preserves. There's no difference. It's the exact same, trying to get everyone together, trying to get enough knowledge to do that burn safely and build that depth. From Kansas, where I was at before, they've been burning, particularly in the Flint Hills, for 100 plus years. So that knowledge is kind of already there. So coming up to Canada, when we first started out, it was a much lower level, and it's building quick. But in terms of burning and skill set and working with individuals, I'd say it's almost exactly the same. There's a stereotype that Canadians are really nice, and that, in my experience, has been 100% true. When I have to bring out the dad voice and yell at people to get moving, to jump on this or jump on that, they're always much more open to, okay, Brad's trying to get us going the right way. Whereas in the U.S., I might get more pushback from that. And then the differences, really just habitat differences. And so the fuel where we're burning in the prairie in Canada is much lighter than the fuel that I have down here. So it makes it a learning environment for us because it's just a new habitat. But in terms of skill sets, it's exactly the same. In terms of people coming together and trying to learn, I don't see any difference. It's the same there as it is here.
That's definitely fascinating to hear. And especially since like Canada, like TREX events are just growing in Canada, then we don't do nearly as much here as we do down in the States. So it's interesting to hear that they go kind of similarly, other than like the habitat. It's just like a learning experience for all.
Cody had pointed out that the TREXs, I want to say, started in the early 2000s as an actual defined system, a way of learning. And Cody pointed out that we're trying to get the Canadian group to get to where we've had what almost 20 years of planning and working out the bugs and planning and working out the bugs and having this really depth of knowledge. And we're trying to get it done in Canada in just a handful of years. So it always feels like we're stepping on the accelerator much harder in Canada to get everyone into to new positions. In fact, I think on this last burn in Canada, this last TREX, Renny and I might have been the only two that weren't in a new challenging position. Everyone else on the crew, from the person who's first been on there, including to the trainers, it was a new position for them. So it's that level of learning and commitment is different in Canada than it is in the US, because there's so much more to get going on, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's amazing how much we've accomplished in such a little time, especially with the Canadian Prairies described Fire Exchange. And speaking of us, Roy, who is our science coordinator, you were the planning chief for TREX this year. And this is your first time as a planning chief. So I want to know from you specifically, what did you learn from this overall experience?
Yeah, there were lots of challenges, but I think it was a really great opportunity for me to step in as a planning chief this time. I've been part of the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange over the last 4 years and helping in different ways to develop this great training opportunity for everyone. But I think stepping as a planning chief gave me really much deeper appreciation of how this is a really critical role. And I guess clearly communication and to lead into a successful operation of the whole week during TREX. I think that's something that I learned, and deeply appreciation of everybody's work on the during this week. I think what I learned particularly is how important is to gather very important information on how to plan on a daily basis. What things are going to make sure the entire team understands objectives, constraints, etc. I think that's something that is really important that I learned during the week. I also understand how dynamic prescribed fire operations are. I've been involved with prescribed fires working with Renny, with Kerry over the last 5 years, but I think having this role as a planning chief gave me an appreciation how that actually can change during the week because of weather. Personal changes, logistics are really a lot of moving parts here that we need to maintain that flexibility and providing some really strong structure for the whole training week for all the participants to gain the knowledge that they were trying to acquire during that week. Yeah, I think that's essentially what I believe are my great learning experiences during as a planning chief during TREX.
And for Kerry, you also had a first-time role this year. You were the operations chief. Can you talk more about that and entering that role for the first time?
Sure. Well, I got talked into taking the role of operations chief this year. I'm quite glad I did. I would argue that I learned as much at this particular event. Goodness, I would argue that I learned more at this particular event in this role than I had at any of the previous TREXs. It was a little bit of feeling like I was an imposter because previously our trainers had taken that particular role. And, now we're, as Canadians, are stepping into those roles and trying to do it ourselves, among ourselves. And it's a big step in responsibility. And I really kind of felt that in our incident management team meetings at night when we were discussing what had happened during the day, what the weather and the conditions were for the next day. In previous years, I was a little more passive. I was listening and learning, but not the person making decisions on Are we going to try? Where are we going to go? What's the soil underneath our prescribed fire sites? Because it just rained and it won't dry out enough to burn unless we're on sand. And taking responsibility for some of those decisions, even if I was one of a team, felt really scary at first. However, I think we made good decisions. Looking back on the week, I think we learned a lot and had a lot of opportunities. I think that was fantastic. It did stretch me a little bit, and I was a little uncomfortable at times. But that's what we're telling everyone who comes into this event is you will be stretched and you'll be a little uncomfortable. Lean into it, learn from it. You've got mentors around you. And I certainly had mentors around me too. So thank you to all of you folks who are around the table right now, because you really helped to build confidence.
I'd say one of the things that made me the most happy about what you were doing, Kerry, is when you I would say kicked us out of the meeting with the crew leads and the burn bosses every morning. And I mean, you probably just said, well, I asked you to leave, but I was like, it really made them see you as the leader as opposed to us standing there, kind of monitoring you. Because when we first talked about it, I'm like, you do this every day. Now it is definitely different with 3 divisions going. It's a whole lot on your plate. But I'm really, really excited, and you did an amazing job.
And the reason I did that is to make them take the responsibility instead of leaning on the trainers. Like they needed to step up as well. So it is a different mentality. So I'm glad that you saw it that way.
And kudos to Roy and Kerry and the others who stepped into a new role at this year's TREX. If we're not challenging ourselves and we're uncomfortable at times, then we're not growing enough. And I think it was neat to see you, Kerry, take on the operations chief and take your own leadership style and make it your own, because it doesn't have to be exactly the way it's been done in the past. That's the beautiful thing about folks stepping up into leadership roles. So just, yeah, really impressed with the IMT taking on new roles. And it showed the participants too that even the IMT is uncomfortable at times and we're learning and growing.
Absolutely. This is a learning experience for all, and special shout out to Roy and Kerry for taking on these new roles. I also would like to point out with TREX every year we get more and more ambitious, and as Brad was mentioning, we had 3 divisions this year, and that's been a first for us. And we also had 57 participants, which is the most that we've had at any TREX. So I would like to ask, how did we navigate having more people and having these divisions, and what did that look like during TREX? Could Renny lead us off with this?
Yeah, so this year, back in the 2024 TREX event, Cody Wallers, who was our lead trainer for the first 3 events, challenged me after our successful event in 2024 to go bigger. And he challenged both Brad and Melanie and Cody sort of challenged me to see if we can sort of push the envelope a little bit. And so as we were just planning for the next event, we were looking at seeing if we can run 3 divisions. Part of going with 3 divisions is you get more people trained in that leadership role, but also you can give you more opportunities to apply fire onto the landscape as well. And so I think one of the biggest successes of that is one of the models we've applied in 2024 was having division leads. So these would be the leads of the crews and getting people ready before they leave the compound, and then mobilizing and then getting to site. And we had this year Sarah Bradley, who led Alpha Division, Samantha Gunn, which was Bravo Division, and Darren Sherritt, who was Division Lead for Charlie Division. And watching those 3 take the lead and develop those skills to lead, almost 20 people under each of them, to get them ready in the morning, brief them, loaded, out to site, unloaded, handed over to the burn boss, and then once the fire operations were done, get everyone loaded and back to the shop and rehabbed at night. They did an excellent job with that, and I think that's what really added to the ability to handle that kind of number of people and that, coordination. What really impressed me was I would show up, we would have everyone on site at 8 a.m., bums and seats kind of thing for morning briefing. People would start arriving around 7 o'clock. Those three would be at the shop at 6:45 meeting, sort of talking about the day previously, but then also planning for the day ahead and sharing ideas of what they learned, but also how they can help problem solve with each other. And I was super impressed with their leadership. And I think that really led to the success of the event, is having those key roles there. They were part of the IMT, but they sort of provided that middle management level or the leadership level, which was very helpful in being successful in the event. Also, these individuals are, Sam Gunn is with the Saskatoon Public School Division. She was led a burn last year on her site at Brightwater Center. She was the burn boss, but this was a new leadership role for her. Sarah Bradley's with Nature Conservancy of Canada, and she's one of their stewardship coordinators. And so for her too, this was a new leadership role. And then Darren Sherritt was served as a crew leader the year before. He's with Tanis Conservation of Alberta, and then this year moved up into a division lead. So I think that was, for myself, one of the reasons we were very successful. Also, I was challenged, and I tried not to step back on a challenge. And so I sort of helped guide the rest of the IMT and the planning committee on following through with that challenge.
Yeah, I think, in addition, what Renny says is that, so this year was the largest that we ever organized during the CPPFE time, the first 5 years of the CPPFE. Previously, we have no more than 40 or 45 participants. That this year we increased that amount to almost 60 participants, which is something that is really important to highlight here, is that one of the main lessons for TREX is that people can connect, can develop that network, that partnership among different agencies that work with prescribed fires. So this year we had 28 different agencies, which represents almost maybe 15% of compared to the last year, and that creates that improvement into how you can connect with more people and create those partnerships across the prairies and the United States. So that's something that they really wanted to highlight. When you increase that amount of participation, you can also create those network opportunities.
Yeah, I think, when you look at bumping up to that size, trying to get to 60 individuals in 3 divisions, you can think of all the things that could go wrong. It's just a massive undertaking of logistics just to make sure everything is in the right place, where we want it. And I can't think of a single thing that we had a problem with that was due to that large size. The only issue we had were our radios. And for your listeners, we have 3 divisions, and sometimes those divisions were close enough working on the fires that our 2-channel radio frequency sometimes would overlap. So there was an issue kind of getting in and out of the compound because we had to talk to each other doing that. But that's also a realistic issue, in the States, where we have an entire burn essentially running on one frequency or a couple of sub frequencies off that main one. But outside of that, it was amazing. I can't think of a single thing that went wrong. Everything else is like, well, maybe I would change this. It's like changing the icing on a cake. It went really, really smooth. Logistics were amazing.
Yeah, and I'll add, I feel like it shows the care and time and energy that has been taken from year 1 of the Canadian Prairies TREX to be able to increase the participation in year 4. And just a great test to see what the event can handle without overdoing extending the IMT. And like Renny said, the seed was planted last year. So the time and energy that's spent thinking about how we can grow these events started 1 year ago. And so it's exciting to see and think beyond like what the next year, next 5-10 years look like. But I agree with Brad. I think it went really well and just shows that all the years before this event, this year 4, it just shows how much groundwork has been done to get us to this point.
Yeah, I would just applaud Renny and the team for being willing to expand to nearly 60 people. I mean, it's one thing to look at that number of 57 people that were part of it, but with that comes all the vehicles, the equipment, the UTVs, trailers, and to boot, we got to put the show on the road and take all divisions to different sites on burn days. So it's a massive undertaking. It's logistically a handful, and yeah, once again, just applaud the team for handling it well and maintaining that solid leadership structure and still giving all participants an awesome experience.
And part of the success too of that logistics is all the partner agencies that are involved during the TREX event is bringing their equipment to the site as well. Trucks, UTVs, hand tools, leaf blowers, and also preparing sites as well. In the Saskatoon region, we have multiple agencies that are all working together on fire. And we prepared nearly 30 burn units for that week. And so, work is already starting for next year's. Agencies are starting to think about, okay, what can we burn next year? What could we prepare? Start planning for their burn units. And that is a huge undertaking as well. We burned about 187 acres during the event. We only really had 2 decent burn days, and we burnt a third day. But we had over 1,000 acres prepared for that week-long burn event, right? With nearly 30 burn units. So, it's that bigger collective and everyone pooling their resources and equipment and sites and knowledge and experience that really pulls off the success.
Renny, you are going right into the next point, which is like, as you were mentioning, there's so many acres of burn units prepared. So can we go more into how we decided which ones to prioritize for this TREX, given that we only burned on 3 days, as you mentioned?
Well, the selections weren't quite as difficult because although we had upwards of 30 burn units prepared and available to us, we were heavily constrained by wind direction primarily because some of these locations couldn't have been burned when we sent smoke in a particular direction. So they were off the table given what the weather was for the next day. But also, it had been cold and damp. In fact, it rained the day before TREX began, and we were battling with the fuel moisture being too high to even carry fire. So we actually had to consult with the agencies who had prepared burn units and find out what was the soil underneath it and how fast would it dry. Sand is a great example. At Chief Whitecap Park, the soil underneath where we burned on Tuesday was quite sandy. And so that drains away moisture quickly and tends to dry out the surface more quickly. And thankfully we had that because I came back to my home agency the week afterwards and it still wasn't dry enough to carry a fire on our more silty, loamy sites. So yeah, it's in-depth knowledge of the prescribed burn sites from the agency managers. It's also an in-depth knowledge of what wind direction and what smoke management is required, as well as there's a little bit of if there are 5 burn units that are suitable for that day, whose do we do? Well, if we did one agency's the day before, we don't want to give one particular agency all of the fires, so maybe we'll share them around a little bit. But that was less of a decision than you might think.
It's fascinating how you need that in-depth knowledge of a site to make that prescription. So like going into these burns and like how the entire week went, can we start going in day by day? So first off was Monday, and we did not burn this day. Instead, we spent a day basically familiarizing the crews and going around and testing out the equipment and doing some brief mock burns. Can we go and talk more about this day and what went into it and what went well and what could have maybe been done better?
I think, day one is always just a good time to focus on getting everyone on the same page. For a lot of folks, it was their first time ever on a prescribed fire or even at a TREX event. for others, it was their first burn of the season. And so I think regardless of experience, it's important to kind of set that stage of like a refresher for the season and getting everyone to look at certain tools and talking about equipment and getting familiar with your divisions. As it was said previously, there's all kinds of new equipment that's coming in. And so if we can set day one up for success, that folks are going to come in and get familiar with their tools and equipment, then the rest of the week is going to go even smoother. And so being able to dedicate sufficient time during that first day to take the time to go through all of that familiarization is especially important, which can be difficult if the weather is optimal for burning. But I feel it was a really important time to set aside for participants and even for the IMT to kind of start ourselves in a position where we could keep growing and building on to the rest of the week.
Yeah, I'd add to that the you only have 5 days, so you want to burn every day. But as a trainer, you're always hoping the first day is rained out or winded out or something, so we can all break up in groups, really get familiar with your team, get familiar with all the different pumps that show up, all the different equipment. Every group that has burning experience is bringing that kind of baggage with them, and we need to say, okay, that's how you did it on this burn, that's how you did it on that burn, but I want you guys to get together, and this is how we're going to do it on these burns. And you can change it once you get familiar with everybody, but it really gives us a chance to learn. And as an instructor, I always hope, it's sacrilegious, but I always hope the first day is a rain out, so we can spend time going through really basic skill sets that just don't translate in watching videos, or, like Mel said, you're coming in with experience, but it might be your first burn of that year, and it kind of helps you knock off those cobwebs. So it was a really good first day. I was doing ignition patterns, and we'd been rained on or had wet ground twice in 2 years that I've been doing this. And Renny gave me some matting. It was coconut fiber, and we are going to set that coconut on fiber, and it was just a big rolled out mat. And I thought, oh yeah, it was worked really well. And the first couple of times it worked pretty well, but as that mat dried out and really turned into ash, it started floating away. So we had to, and it was still with embers, so we had to stop that early. But it did give everyone a real good chance to get their hands on the torches and see what was going to be expected of them the next day when we actually went and did live. So for me, Monday was awesome. It's exactly what I wanted as an instructor.
The one challenge with Monday, like Brad said, it was windy. The wind had picked up later in the morning. It was also bitterly cold in the morning as well. We were, I think, 2 or 3 degrees Celsius. So people were a little bit chilly, but I think it motivated people also to start moving around and testing out the equipment as well. But yeah, it worked out well to do that hands-on experience. And we had 16 brand new people at the event that had never experienced prescribed fire before, right? So 16 out of 57. So I think it was really important that we had spent the morning going through equipment, doing those scenarios, learning how to run everything, because that was very, very important.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I was kind of on the outside perspective, but I feel like if it were my first prescribed fire, I would probably want to have that refresher first. So I think it worked really well to do that on that Monday, especially with like 16 people. And it's a great opportunity for those who are experienced to learn from it as well. And I know Carrie also hosts refreshers every year at her site that does the exact same thing to people who even have years and years of prescribed fire experience. So it's important for everybody for sure. So it's really nice that happened that first day. Going into the rest of the week, so the second day we did do burning, and it was at what we considered training grounds at Chief Whitecap Park, which is a Meewasin site. So can we talk more about how this day went? It was largely a training day, as I mentioned, so I would like the trainers to lead this one. And how did this go, especially for those first-time participants? What did you guys do, and how did it go? And do you think the participants felt more confident for future burn days?
Yeah, I can start on this. This has been a dream of mine to get a spot fire training ground on every TREX in the U.S. that I work on. And just because of logistics and everything. I've never had anybody able to do this. And I was talking to Renny maybe last year about doing something like this. And then he said, "Hey, I think I got this place." Um, and it's it's a great experience because really when you think of a fire, it has a head fire, which is the fire that's running with the wind. The backfire is backing into the wind, and the flank fires are on the side. But it really has four parts. It's a head fire, backfire, flank fire, and a spot fire. Spot fires always occur. It's just part of what we do. And even with a good crew, if they don't know who's going to break off and who's going to jump into that fire and how to jump into a spot fire while you have another fire on the line, it's really hard to talk about, and it's really unnerving when it happens. And so here we can let it happen in a controlled environment. The instructors were deliberately setting these spot fires behind the crew as they were lighting their own fire, and they had to respond and do it in a organized manner that would allow them to catch that fire and put it out and do it in a safe way. So we have, we broke up in our three divisions, and, we take one crew out, or well, at least I took one crew out and had them work, and everyone else watched, which makes it unnerving because now everyone's watching you make a mistake. And they weren't sure really what was going to happen until they turned around and saw that big fire. And then they turn around and they all have to bumble through that, and it's in a safe spot so we can put it out and go back and try it again and go back and try it again until it's a smooth response. And it's not just like a bunch of 6-year-olds chasing a soccer ball. It's an intelligent response. Like, I'm going to have you break off and start fighting it. And if you need additional help, call for that. But if you got it, let me know and stay in touch. So it was a great playground to go in and learn and make mistakes and learn again and sit down and stop and do an AAR, after every single spot fire. What would we do different? How we change it? All right, let's go back, change it again. So I loved it. I really want next year, if we can control the mowing, next year, to have this as a tool that I can show the rest of the TREXs in the States. This is what you can do with a spot like this.
I agree, Brad. I think Tuesday's training opportunity was just a great addition to this year's Treks. And the only downside on Tuesday was that the conditions were not optimal to simulate a true like spot fire scenario because we were still dealing with that wet conditions. The fire behavior was low. But regardless, participants expressed feeling grateful for the lower intensity training that they got on Tuesday, because they were able to put that into practice later on in the week. And I think it's important for participants to know, I mean, if we're starting a fire and we're in charge of a prescribed fire, we should also be expected to know how to put it out and how to do that safely and confidently. And I think by the end of the day, everyone was feeling more confident in their abilities to respond to a spot fire when it does happen. So I think, in future years, having a training like that is going to be really valuable for everyone.
Yeah, I would add to that, everyone, it's easy to think about those, first 15 and their first chance on fire and seeing spot fires and learning so much. But even for the crew leads and the burn bosses to have that learning and know that I can order a crew to go over and jump on that spot and know that they've got it. So it's not just the lower level individuals that are learning how to directly fight that fire, but it's the burn boss and the crew leads on each side, knowing that they'll be able to fight that, knowing that they can send a crew over and have them fight it and still control the fire that they're burning, the main burn. Yeah, it was super cool. And it was a really, the fuel levels weren't really well. I sent Sam Morrison out to go around and find me some fuel because I was trying to set these huge head fires and I just couldn't get anything going. We found some spots that were marginally good and definitely challenged everybody. But I'm hoping next year, if we can cut down on the haying, we can do more realistic size fires and let people see what might really happen on a burn and then how to respond to that.
I really felt that Tuesday's exercises were just a nice complement to the work that we did on Monday. It just was a sensible progression as we worked up to a full, prescribed burn. So, yeah, I thought that as a trainer, it was just the perfect progression that we could ask for to get people moving in the right direction and ready for a prescribed burn. And as far as the first time participants, that initial exposure to live fire is so valuable. I mean, it's if people have never seen a grass fire before, it can be kind of shocking and new and make people feel a little uncomfortable. So I think, especially for the new participants, that exposure to live fire was valuable. And then, like Brad said, even for those of us that have been around fire for a long time, just to observe others make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, talk about it as a group. What would we do different? I think was a valuable day all around and set us up well for the rest of the week.
And I think just to add to that, I think besides the fact that everybody was able to experience those training exercises, I think especially for the first time practitioners, it was a great follow up of the previous day of the mock scenarios on how of those different stages that we went through, how to manage equipment, how to set up those different equipment that we use for prescribed fire. For example, during the training exercises, I saw new prescribed fire practitioners trying to set up the drip torch, and they were struggling a little bit. So they kind of experienced in real life how to set up those tools. And I think that was a really great training opportunity for them. I saw a couple of people putting the loop backwards, but later on they learned how to put it forward. So that was really cool to see.
So the Wednesday was a pretty big day for us. So this one was interesting. This was like our big burn day, right? The 3 divisions went out and did their own respective burns at Cranberry Flats and Beaver Creek, which are both Meewasin sites, as well as NCC Asquith. Weather conditions were pretty good for relative humidity and temperature, yet we experienced some unstable wind conditions throughout the day. So I want to know, as a roundtable, how did these 3 divisions navigate these tough conditions, and how did this burn day go overall?
I think this was one of the coolest burn days that I've been on. It was light and variable wind, and that means the fire's not going to behave the way you predict it's going to behave. It has the ability to really be subtly changed by slope or by, possibly on our site, the center prairie was hot enough that it was drawing air into that. It just makes it a wild card in terms of burning. And I was really fascinated once we got back by the different approaches of each of the different burn bosses and the instructors. And we had a long discussion about whether or not we were going to go forward or not on my unit. And, we kind of decided, I kind of decided, okay, we'll take a chunk. And if we have to do this whole thing in chunks, it was a kind of a long, narrow unit, we could cut it off and keep making these bites. The response I liked the most was Ian's, and he stopped and didn't let the burn go because it was out of prescription. Let it go for a little bit longer. And the pressure that we all have, particularly at IC, is at best, we're going to get on average about 3 days of burn. And this is a window that we have. Is there something we can do, some kind of training, some kind of learning that we can do? And Ian said, hey, let's start blacklining, which is generally a safer, more controlled fire, and it still gets your crew burning and gets them doing something. And so they started blacklining the outside of their unit, and then at some point converted that completely into a burn. So for me, it was a really neat learning experience, looking at the different ways the crews and the burn bosses handled that fire, and then the way the crews themselves handled it as that challenge presented itself. It was neat. My gut feeling would be on a light and variable wind day not to do it at all. But looking at it from my burn and working with my burn boss, and Kerry was with us that day, the fuel was light enough that we were able to do it and do it safely. So afterwards, it was pretty cool to look at how everyone came up with their plans and what they did.
I agree, Brad. It was neat to see all the divisions take a different kind of direction on what that day brought. I was on the Alpha Division on the Cranberry Flats unit, and just Wednesday in general was a good opportunity to see how different the fire behavior can respond when it's drier and more unstable conditions, especially after Tuesday spot fire training. And for our division, the test fire proved that the wind was really shifty, light, variable, And we had to acknowledge that it was going to be difficult trying to burn with this variable winds. And as a result, the fire was going to be fuel driven, meaning that it was going to be moving in the direction of available fuel, which was going to push the crew to increase their pace and decision making. And so after our division acknowledged this, potential challenge on only day 3 of the TREX, and for some people, the first time in a role using a drip torch or first time on a burn, we were going to be pushing people maybe beyond their comfort levels. But my hope is from that day, I mean, we all were able to take what we had learned from Monday and Tuesday and apply it to Wednesday. But my hope is that crew members took what they learned on that Wednesday and they know what to do and how to respond when they're burning on maybe light variable days or the wind is shifty and can respond to those situations. And I think it was really valuable the next day that we conducted a thorough AAR after action review, so that everyone could understand the what and the why of that day. And so it was neat to just be able to recap and talk about each individual division and that there's no one right way to conduct a burn, that there's going to be several different ways to do that.
When I look back on Wednesday, for me, it was a day of intense leadership growth for those people that were in leadership positions that day, that were forced with the task of decision making and deciding whether it was a go or no go. It was a challenging day. I think you can't underemphasize the challenges with decision making that come with implementing prescribed fire. It's one thing to have the hands-on skills and be able to conduct a burn, but to make those tough decisions in a challenging weather day like that, especially when you have an entire division looking to you for that decision, it's challenging. So uh, proud of our burn bosses that day and Renny and the IMT for having the courage to move forward that day. We felt confident and I think, yeah, we made right decisions to put fire on the ground. We encountered some challenges due to the weather, but overall, what a great day of learning. And I think for all participants, just to see the people in those decision-making roles go through that process and observe those challenges, I think it was valuable for everybody. So all around, good things came out of a challenging day.
For sure. And also, the day after that was a mop up. We didn't burn on the Thursday, but we did go back to those sites to do mop up. And I'm just curious, what was learned from that day and that experience?
I'm not sure how many here were on the mop up. I talked to some of my crews when they came back, and they were surprised that things were still burning. I think in their head is as soon as you leave, it is shut down. So I think it reinforced the idea that, particularly if you have woodies, you've got to go back out and check them by hand and kind of however whatever that distance is you decided you need to be in from the edge, that has to be out cold. So I think they were surprised by how much was still hot out there. But I was stuck back in camp, so I didn't get to go back out with them.
On Wednesday night, when we agreed that we'd have to go back the next day to 2 of our sites that had woody material that was still smoldering when we left, although safely within the blackened area, I thought, yeah, okay, no big deal. We'll send, maybe half the crew. And then my division lead for that particular fire was saying, oh, we'll just send 1 crew. It was just a little bit. And I remember having this twinge of misgiving because that particular site was a 45-minute drive from our compound. And mop up is usually bigger than we anticipate. Maybe I should prompt him to send more than just 1 crew. But I didn't. And that poor crew spent, 6 hours trying to mop up all by themselves. And honestly, that's not a good scenario. Others needed that learning too. And these folks didn't need to work in that hard, dirty job all by themselves. They could have done with some extra people, perhaps another crew sent with them. So I got learning from that. I think the division lead got learning from that. And it's just really interesting that sometimes you have to, when you step up into a leadership position, you hear that little voice inside going, maybe that's something different. You have to actually listen to that and do something about it, not just think it. And that was a good learning for me.
I think also on the morning or the morning of the Thursday, we spent quite a couple of hours just doing a sort of that, like Melanie had said, a detailed after action review, where we had discussion of what happened the day before and what we learned from it, right? And I think it was really helpful for everyone, experienced burners, but also new people as well, just to hear that thought process and have that more detailed discussion of how that day went, right? And because quite often when we do these after action reviews after a burn, we finish burning, we load up equipment, we do after action review, and we try and get back as quick as possible. So I think this gave that opportunity for people to have that bigger discussion and hear different ideas of how the approaches were taken, and learning from each of the different divisions as well, because you experience your own division, but hearing from the other divisions as well, I think is quite important.
Yeah, I think in addition to what Renny says is that one of the factors that led to that decision of sending all the crews to mop up that day is that, mop up is important part of the fire operation, but also that gave us time from the planning perspective to have a little bit of time of what Renny says to the groups to kind of reflect a little bit of the day before how those fire went to those different units. But also, I think that gave us a little bit of an opportunity. I don't remember correctly if Melanie actually had the opportunity to talk about what leadership means, and I think that created a lot of very positive impacts in the participants. After reading the survey feedback from them, they highlight how really important that opportunity for Melanie to present what exactly leadership means under those circumstances. That was really helpful. I don't remember if Melanie actually presented on the Thursday or the day before, but I think that's something that really create having that moment of reflecting and also listening to those experienced people on those different important topics is also to highlight.
Yeah, Roy, good point. I think it was that morning, the Wednesday morning, that we had the presentation on leaders' intent, and what better day to have had that conversation with everyone to talk about, how to be a leader and how do you express what and how you want a situation to go. So that's such a good point. It kind of led into Wednesday and beyond into Thursday.
On the Thursday as well, as we did those mop-ups and we decided not to burn. I'm gonna address this question to Kerry. What drove that decision making, and how does the weather impact decisions like this?
Right, IMT members, I'm pulling on our collective memory. What was the weather forecast for Thursday? Was it that the winds were too high?
The winds were too high with gusting winds during the afternoon, but then calming down late afternoon, but 180-degree wind shift.
That was it. Okay. There's your answer. Why didn't we burn on Thursday? Well, the weather was not in prescription, or perhaps I should say not in prescription for long enough. The wind was supposed to be gusting over our wind threshold for prescribed fire in these parts of the prairies. Once you get up to gusts over about 30 kilometers an hour, it really starts changing the behavior of the fire, makes it jump and skip over fuels in some cases, and makes it less predictable. And that's not something that we want to go into eyes wide open. Occasionally during a fire event, the wind will unexpectedly get up above that. And it's tricky enough to deal with at that point. You don't want to go into a fire with those conditions waiting for you. So that's what's called a no-go. You're all prepared. You've got everything ready. You got the crew there. you're ready and set to go, and then you have to say no at the last minute. For us, it was the night before, so it wasn't as last minute as some, but it's kind of hard. Now, because of the experience and the depth in leadership and trainers at this event, there is no lack of things that we can do by day 4 if there's no fire possible that day. So we did quite gainfully fill that day full of learning opportunities. However, high winds, gusty winds, 180-degree wind shifts that aren't agreeable for a particular fire. Yeah, those are all things that will stop us from doing a fire.
However, the winds were looking in the models, looking at slowing down later in the afternoon, and we had a few people chomping at the bit, thinking that we could maybe head out to do a burn. But then the winds started picking up early in the evening as well, right? So there was like only a 2-hour window where the winds had died down, but the forecast and the actual weather had these wind gusts later in the early evenings. So I think we made the right choice not to burn that late afternoon, early evening.
From experience of watching weather and then seeing it come through, the timing of the wind changes is perhaps one of the bigger variables. They can't be very precise about it in the forecast. And yeah, they can be out by a few hours, if not half a day in some cases. So yeah, giving yourself 2 hours to do a prescribed fire before the wind changes is probably not a great idea.
And this week was really a weird week for Canada. We had a huge low pressure system off of Juneau that was just locked there, and the jet stream had sort of broken up coming around that. So it gave us, you can kind of think of it as just a big letter U of wind moving across Saskatoon. One moment the wind's pushing south, and as that moves across, the wind changes direction and goes back north. So almost every day we had some version of that happening, which meant that we started a little later or tried to get in early and get home early. And on Thursday, it was just nothing we could do. It was a 180-degree wind shift, and on one of the models, we had maybe 2 hours. And then when I try to work with land managers, like, you need to have it done and out by this time, and that includes any possible mistake. So if you have to go fight a spot fire and it takes a little bit longer to get the rest of the fire done, the weather doesn't care. You still have to have it done in that window. And then I try to get my firefighters to think about, if it jumps and you need to call the fire department to come out and help, they're now going to fight it in the bad wind you chose not to burn in, and you've set them up for failure. So that our window isn't just when we burn, it's when we burn and the time after that we need to either go out and mop up or have additional help and resources to put out a larger fire. So yeah, that day was, I know there's some people chomping at the bits, and I was like, if everything went perfect, it'd be a hard fire to pull that off in that little bit of time. And the predictions are always off plus or minus, a couple of hours sometimes.
I think it was good for participants to see the IMT make that decision too, following our light variable day on Wednesday, and then understanding the value of watching what the weather is going to be doing that day. And while we decided burning was out of the question, we used that day for mop up on the previous day's units, but also scouting the units that we were able to burn on Friday. So it wasn't a wasted day by any means. It was a great way for participants to just see the value in making that decision and then knowing how to make the most of a non-burn day.
And I think that scouting that we did on Thursday afternoon with all the divisions, all the sites that we were planning to burn on Friday was very helpful, because it allowed us to make sure everything was ready when we showed up on site on Friday. Conditions were set to burn.
I also want to point out one of the excellent things we did on Thursday was, after we went to scout our locations, those of us who went to Blackstrap, the bunch of us got hand tools out and actually tried doing a little bit of hand line. And that's where you take hand tools and scrape the vegetation, the litter, all the standing grass off the surface. So there's bare ground and little tufts of grass sticking up in it. Essentially a fuel break. And you can do it by hand. And you have, 10, 12, 15 people in a row, all pulling with a rake and maybe do a little chopping on some of the woody fuels with a kind of hoe or rake that you can get, and it really works quickly. So we actually modified the prescribed fire boundary quite substantially during our scouting and learned a new technique that many of us haven't used before in Canada.
So going into the fact we did 4 burns the following day, the last day on the Friday, we burned at Saskatoon National Grasslands, Wanuskewin, Blackstrap Provincial Park, and Aberdeen Community Pasture. So can we talk about how the Friday went? What did we learn from this day?
So on the Aberdeen pastures, they're fairly heavily grazed, and the cattle are avoiding woody encroachment. And a lot of the woodies, particularly some of the smaller ones, have a lot of thorns on them. The cows just don't eat them, so it expands pretty quickly once it gets going. And Sam's goal was to put fire breaks around those, and then try to really drive fire into that woody establishment. So that meant that almost every unit that we were burning inside a much larger unit were sort of odd and goofy shaped. He tried to make them rounded edges, but he's following the terrain because some of them are pots that are just down really low, so we're kind of burning around that. Others are kind of odd shaped. And the nice thing about it, these are much, much smaller. So for the first one we started with a really nice round one, and I was able to get the entire crew stationed on the downwind side and show how you could burn a whole unit with just 4, maybe 5 people. And this was maybe 2 acres in size, 3 acres. It wasn't that big. And so we did that. And then I showed them how to burn without laying a wet line, if that fits what they're doing. And certainly in an overgrazed pasture, it's an easy one to learn on. So then as we started burning, we were able to break up and run a different burn boss for each one of these units, and then challenge that burn boss halfway through the burn and say, okay, if you want to, I want you to include this next burn unit that's maybe, I don't know, maybe 15 meters outside of the burn unit we're in. So we're going to have to go across and envelop that at the same time. And all the crews hit it with no problem. We were able to then bump crews back and check, because there's a lot of woodies in there, check on the other one. So we'd sign a crew to go off by itself and go around and put eyes on these other small little kind of patch burns that we're putting inside this larger unit. So it was a great day. The crew had a lot of fun. They were working a lot more independently because of the nature of each one of those little patch units that Sam had cut in. And I think they had a lot of fun with it, and were able to go in and do a lot of interior ignition, trying to light off some of the woodies. Some of them took off really well, some of them not so much. A lot of topography on that site. So for us, it was a lot of learning, and I don't think we could have done it without the training on the spot fires, on day 2, and then the burning on Wednesday. I don't think we could have been that much more relaxed and easy in hitting it the way we wanted to. So it's sort of been the same experience off of every TREX, is that the last day, everyone's really hitting on all cylinders, and it was a great burn and a lot of fun.
I'd like to say that we had a hand in the weather and how things played out that week. But Brad, you stated it right. I feel like the Friday was just the final test, but everything that we learned from the week, including that challenging burn day on Wednesday. And Friday really showcased 3 very different fire behavior days between Tuesday and then our final burn on Friday. From Tuesday's pretty low intensity fire behavior to Wednesday's more fuel driven. And then Friday was, in my opinion, just like the perfect burn day, burn opportunity to learn and grow. I was on the Alpha Division burning at Blackstrap Provincial Park, and we burned 40 acres on a reestablished prairie seeding where fire was going to help reinvigorate the prairie species. And I think Friday just allowed participants to step back, take time to watch and observe fire behavior, as well as practice different fire ignition patterns and techniques that they learned from the classroom with Ryan and Brad's presentations. And ultimately, it was just a day for looking at the big picture of how to conduct a prescribed fire without the intensity and challenge of having to move quickly like we had to do on Wednesday. So Friday was just a beautiful burn day, in my opinion, that I'm so glad that we got to end on that note for folks to walk away with a sense of growth and success.
Couldn't have been a better day to end the week on. I feel like for Division Bravo, it was fun for me to just observe the division, the crew, from the top down, operating as a well-oiled machine. It was pretty neat to see. The only bummer is that it was the last day, and we were just starting to find a rhythm as a division, and then it's time to go home. But overall, yeah, what a great day. I on Division Bravo, we started at Saskatoon National Grasslands, and then finished the day at Wanuskewin, and yeah, I've got a couple different approaches as far as the burn bosses. What stood out to me at Saskatoon National Grasslands was the idea of pushing the pace a little bit, minimizing the time that we had fire on the ground. They were uh, relatively small units. They were well prepared. We had abundant resources, and so we pushed the pace and got those burn units done quickly, and then gave us the opportunity to go to Wanuskewin, and that approach was a little bit more slow and steady. And so that gave our division a nice opportunity to just observe the different paces of the day, and then talk about the pros and cons of when is the right time to push the pace a little bit, and when is a right time to dial it back a little bit and take more of a slow and steady approach. So overall, incredible day for our entire division, and great way to end the week.
With I tagged along with Bravo Division that day because one of the sites was one of my Meewasin sites, Saskatoon Natural Grasslands, and that site we've actually hasn't seen a prescribed fire in over 20 years, and so really dense, heavy fuel load on that site. Also, it's surrounded by housing development on all sides. And so watching Eric Lamb, who was the burn boss from the University of Saskatchewan, challenging the crews to go fast. And I was standing back watching, and I was super impressed. I've been wanting to burn that site for almost 10 years with Meewasin, and just never had the skill set or the experience within the collective in the Saskatoon region. But seeing the development of people over the last 4 years through these TREX events has really allowed us to pull off a burn like that. It was probably one of our more complex ones in the Saskatoon region, and was really impressive to see how things happened. Also want to mention, during that day, at the Aberdeen burn, Sam Morrison's the pasture manager for Aberdeen Municipal Pasture, but the way that burn was set up was there was two new people who were able to burn boss, right? So we had Erica Meyer and then Darren Sherritt were able to put their hands get their hands dirty as new burn bosses as well, which was great to see.
And we didn't treat them nice on that burn. They both started and then went like, hey, Sam comes over, hey, Brett, can we include this other unit? I'm like, yeah, I'll go over and push them and say, guess what? If you're ready, we're going to include this next unit. And it meant the whole system had to shift, and they had to be in charge of that shift. So yeah, they got to burn boss, but they didn't have an easy burn.
Well, I really liked Friday. If we could have gone into this setting up the experiences to be stepwise, I don't think we could have done it better than it actually happened. Friday was, the final challenge. Put everything together and do it smoothly. And everybody rose to the occasion. I was out with Division Alpha at Blackstrap Provincial Park, and to see everybody put their new drip torch skills together, their new holding skills, communication skills, telling people on the radio what they were doing so that the burn boss was informed, but also everybody else on the crew knew what was happening on the different flanks of the fire. I felt like I don't know, perhaps it's like a rehearsal for a music number done by a large group, and everything comes together. Everybody plays their part, and it's wonderful. That's what it felt like.
The last question we have before you guys go is just like your overall remarks. How did it go, and what do we envision for the future of TREX events?
Yeah, honestly, I think what stands out the most to me for the success of the treks was the weeks following the event. Because there was so much chatter and talk about all the number of burns that were conducted after the training, and getting to see and hear the confidence and skills that were built during that week of the treks, and then it was applied outside of the week. It's just, to me, I mean, the whole reason that trexes exist. So it was really, I think, affirming that what we were able to establish and conduct during that week was a true success, because folks took what they learned and they applied it and were off and running.
Yeah, I can add to that. I had talked to several of you about the role of trainers on the burns as we go forward, and it there's sort of this weird thing because the trainers feel like sort of a third wheel, like what are we doing here? We're helping, but we're all also the kind of people that are hands-on and involved in doing stuff. And so it's always been sort of a frustrating thing to stand back and just talk a little bit and offer ideas on a burn. So it's really exciting to see everything take off after the burn, after the Trex week, because that's really what we're after. It's exactly what Mel said. That's what we want to see. One of the questions on here was, what do you want to see in future Trexes? And this is the problem with just Trexes in general, and it kind of where we are right now in Canada, that most of our sites are fairly small, and it takes about an hour, maybe 2 hours of running the torch before you've calmed down. You're no longer like, oh, I'm on a torch, and calm down and really start having that time, that opportunity to see how the fire's behaving and what's going on. And if command says do this, how does that change the fire behavior? How do you see that? So the thing I'd like to see in the future is bigger units. And that may not be possible right around Saskatoon. One of the things that I sort of been itching at is maybe we move the Trex down to where Kerry plays and get much larger units to get that time. The other way to think about it is if the goal of the Trex is education, then maybe that initial education is sort of in the lab, like what we're doing in the Trex. We're all just sort of learning these basic techniques, and that longer term hands-on experience comes afterwards, in the weeks afterwards, which is what it did here. But that's just one of the things that I always think is we don't have enough time for anybody at any one spot on that crew to get over being excited about being there and calming down and saying, okay, this is my job. This is what I'm doing. This is what I see. Maybe I try it this way. Maybe I try it that way, and have a chance to really experience and feel that. But maybe that comes after the treks. Anyway, just it was a great week. I had a lot of fun.
Well, overall, what an incredible experience at the Trex. When we were finishing the day on Friday, it was clear that the group, the participants had a very positive experience. People didn't want to go home. I think people were starting to gel with each other, and were definitely enjoying this experience, and genuinely didn't want it to end because it was such a valuable experience for them. So it was neat to observe that. I saw an inspired group of people that learned a lot and were motivated to uh, hopefully take what they learn and apply it within their communities and help build the culture of fire where they are too. So I think in the long run, giving people a positive experience through the treks will continue to expand and grow the fire community. We just want to touch more acres, put more fire on the ground, educate more people about fire. And there's no doubt that the people that experience this treks are going to go home and do that. So, and one more note in the future of the treks and the longevity of the treks, it really does come down to the leadership structure of the event. I think that's why this event in particular was so successful. But I think as you continue to grow and do more events, really developing your leaders, pinpointing who are going to be the next leaders, who's going to carry the torch, how to share the workload. It's a massive undertaking, like we talked, to put an event like this on. So as it grows, the more leaders that we can develop to help shoulder the workload, I think the better. So overall, incredible leadership, incredible group, and really solid experience.
Well, I thought that the treks went very well. One of the things I like the best is in talking to some of the crew that I work with in my organization after this event. Everyone was full of what they had learned, cool experiences they had, and perhaps what we could do to make it better. Now, we never get the same event twice because of weather and prescribed fire locations and such. So in some ways, it's hard to set up a perfect event. But everybody's thinking about it. Like, people can take apart the experience and point out what could have done better, what could have been better, how they could have done things differently. And I thought that's really smart. We got a really intelligent bunch of people here who are not just physically capable with equipment, tools, and fire, but they're also smart. And so I really like that people are thinking that way, always thinking to improve. I think, where do we go from here? Well, where are we going? Higher. We got to get more of these experiences out there, not just the main one in Saskatoon, which has been a fantastic event. We need to spawn some new events. And I think that's a great idea. And it'll give us different experiences in different locations and keep spreading this style of learning and this excellent experience. I do want to emphasize what a wonderful learning experience it is. You build camaraderie with the team that you're working with in a way that doesn't usually happen in our careers. You get leadership skills built very quickly, and you get to experience things in a really dynamic ecosystem, including an ecosystem process of fire. And that's unusual. It's unusual. And I find it absolutely invigorating and inspiring. So I hope everybody else can come along and learn that too.
Roy, do you have any comments?
I do. Thanks, Kat. Yeah, I think if we think about what is TREX, and I believe TREX is one of the great unique opportunities that we have, especially for first-time practitioners to learn. It's a safe environment to learn lessons and to make mistakes, perhaps, and improve those mistakes throughout the same week. And that's really important because I think we experienced that during these weeks, this TREX week, this fall, where we have several different challenges during the first days, but at the end of the week, we apply all of those perhaps mistakes, different learning opportunities. So we ended up with a perfect day on the Friday with a full prescribed fire, with the right operations. Everybody feel confident. We apply all of those leadership skills. So to me, that experience was of growing of the whole participant as a group. That was amazing. So if you ask me how was TREX, to me, one single word, it was amazing. I agree with Kerry and the others are saying that I think how can I see TREX in the future is not only focused on Saskatchewan, maybe we can spread out throughout the prairies, because we want to increase the capacity of using fire safely across the prairies. And that's kind of the opportunities that we're looking for. That's how I envision to bring more people, bring more agencies through different ecosystems in the prairies, and to apply that concept of TREX in those different conditions, whether in the spring, whether in the fall. I think that creates that opportunity for everyone to experience that TREX environment. So that's my thought, Kat.
Yeah, so for the listeners, I do want to mention that in every spring, we've been the Canadian Prairies Fire Exchange has been co-hosting in Manitoba, in the Tallgrass Prairie in southeastern Manitoba, with the Nature Conservancy of Canada TREX events. So there was this year was the third Tallgrass Prairie TREX event in Manitoba this past May. Unfortunately, because of the severe fire behavior and provincial fire bans in Manitoba, they weren't able to burn this year. But they did do 5 days of training, both classroom and field training as well, even though there was no fire opportunities. So, so this is not the only event that's being done in the prairies as well. This is one of two which we're looking at as the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange into the future, applying more TREX models across the three prairie provinces as well. So I think we're definitely seeing a lot of interest in this hands-on training experience, and we have a lot of interest from people to attend next year, but other regions of the prairies as well wanting to host events as well. So trying to build that capacity. One of the challenges is it takes a lot of work to put this together, a lot of logistics, lots of planning, bringing the trainers up. Their agencies and they're volunteering their time, and their agencies are volunteering their time to come up to participate in this, right? And the agencies that are hosting it as well are donating their time as well. So it is a big endeavor, but I think the benefit is huge, right? Just seeing in the Saskatoon region, Roy and I were just at a meeting the other day with the local municipality around Saskatoon and a couple of volunteer fire department chiefs. And they're really interested in looking at this model as well, saying, hey, how can we start using fire as a land management tool, or how can we use this as a learning opportunity for our people as well? So, we're getting a lot of attention and people are really interested in this. And I think it's a huge opportunity. Also, but looking down at individual organizations as well, a couple of weeks after the TREX event at late October, first week of November, we were conducting some prescribed fires in the Saskatoon region. We had a window that opened up, and just seeing the skill set of the participants, the two burns that we conducted, it was amazing to see how they were applying what they learned in those burn operations, and seeing that level of skill and knowledge and leadership in the individuals was quite remarkable. And what was also was interesting was quite often in the Saskatoon region, as different agencies all burned together, and we actually split up and we burnt in two different locations. University of Saskatchewan was leading a burn out at Foam Lake Community Pasture. Some people went out to go and help with that burn, and then some people helped us at Meewasin burn at one of our sites here. So it was interesting to see how the partners now have expanded their skill set and experiences, and to able to have multiple burns going on in multiple locations at the same time, and the partners actually splitting our resources and helping each other burn, which was, I think, has come out of this training exchange model as well. So it's been great to see, and I think we're seeing this. We're at this cusp of this experience that people have learned over the last 4 years to take this to grow our individual fire programs as well. I definitely want to thank Brad and Melanie and Ryan for coming up. For them, it's a big commitment to come north, spend a week with us. And, it's not just the 5 days, but it's the travel, the pre-planning for the event, the work that they do with helping guide and coach us. And then afterwards as well, we have a lot of discussions post event as well, right, on how we can make things better for next year. And that leadership and knowledge and skill set that they bring is very valuable, and that wisdom. The United States is a lot further in their fire programs than we are. Like I think Brad said, like 40 years more advanced or ahead of us, I guess. But having that experience and sharing that with us has really helped us really advance our programs here in Canada. So definitely, I'd like to thank the three of you for that time and experience. And I think it's really helped us grow up here in the prairies.
Well, I'd say thanks, and all you have to do is call and ask, and I will find a way to drop everything and come up. And it just really gets to what Kerry was saying in terms of building that. It's a unique teamwork that shows up on a TREX if you design it right, that everyone's really looking out for each other. Sam was able to ask his crew on particularly that last day, and my experience is once your division's done demobbing, they're like, I'm out. Like, I'm not sticking around. I'm tired. I'm hot. I'm going to get a shower. I'm going to go eat. And he said, hey, listen, let's stick around and help these other crews come in. And that's sort of the heart of what should show up in a Trex. And a lot of times it does, sometimes it doesn't. And Kerry talked about it, like it changes everything. It makes it so much easier, so much more fun to be part of that crew. And you guys have built that. Like it's an awesome place to come and burn. So anytime, give me a call, I'll come up.
Thank you guys so much for coming up, and to all of you for helping out with Trex and coming up and sharing your expertise. It's so valuable. And also thank you for being on the podcast and sharing your experiences. This was such a great time to chat about what went down at Trex, and this was recorded almost exactly a month after, and it's great that we've all come together with that much time passing to talk about this. Thank you everybody for coming.
Well, it's our privilege and pleasure. Like I said at the IMT meeting, such a privilege to deal with a bunch of people like you. You're awesome to work with.
Absolutely. Yes.
Likewise.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you, everybody. This was a neat experience. Appreciate it.
And I'd like to actually take the time to thank our sponsor for the Canadian Prairies Prescribed Fire Exchange. It's the Weston Family Foundation, their Prairie Grassland Initiative. Their leadership over the last 5 years, providing funding for the creation of the fire exchange, has led to the success, right? And led to, the success of the TREX model, but also the success of increased awareness and knowledge and experience as applying safe, good fire on the landscape through prescribed fire. I'm very grateful for their support, and I really want to acknowledge their support for this. So thank you very much to the Westons.
Yeah, it has been amazing. And to see the impact that their dollars have had has just been crazy. It's just really exciting.
So that wraps up today's discussion about the 2025 Canadian Prairies TREX. Thank you to Renny, Roy, Kerry, Melanie, Brad, and Ryan for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us on the pod today. And a huge thank you once again to the Weston Family Foundation's Prairie Grasslands Initiative for making what we do possible. If this episode got you excited about TREX and you want to know more about future opportunities, keep an eye on our website at grasslandfire.ca for upcoming training announcements. You can also sign up for our mailing list or follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn to make sure you never miss an update. Until next time, stay curious about the power of prescribed fire. This is Prairie Fire Lines, where we keep the conversation burning. And I'm your host, Kat Zenz, signing off.